Had trouble concentrating, so I didn't get super good grades. When you have something that's different from all the other kids and you're in a public school, it's brutal. You have to go to a special class and kids make fun of you big time.
I remember I got in a fist fight right here on this parking lot.
My grandfather was a very hard man. He went through the Great Depression. He was always hardest on me because I was real spastic and like ADD and like real hyperactive. You know, he was intimidating, to be honest. You know, you go fishing with him and if you didn't do it right, you know, he'd pull your ear. Sometimes I thought maybe he didn't even like me.
His senior year of college, he showed us a list of 17 different things he wanted to do that year. Only one of them was be a full-time college student. So he was weatherman on the local TV station. He was disc jockey of his own show that's still going.
A lot of times in college, you don't know what you want to do and you're trying to figure it out. Deep down, what I really wanted to do is try to start a radio station. It was a dream of mine to have artists that had a Christian message or a Christian backdrop be accepted as normal. So, of course, on my radio show, what I wanted to do was just throw them in there here or there. I wanted to see if they could just stand on their own, and they could.
We're all about Wranglers, Stetson, and cowboy hats. That's what we're about.
We were just like, some hicks in Arkansas that loved metal and loved Slayer and Metallica and Believer. And so, I mean, we just kind of tried to do our own thing and have our own sound. But at that time, the idea of Christian metal, the only thing like general market or non-Christian, maybe industry thought about was Stryper.
So on my radio show, let's say I played 40 songs. Most of those were like Nirvana, Green Day. And then I would throw in a few of the bands with Christian backdrop. And those were Scattered Few, The Crucified, and Living Sacrifice.
Even though we don't necessarily listen to the same stuff as we did when we were growing up, it's like it's still there. It's what we feel, and whenever we get together to write as a band, I mean, it's just what comes out.
People just didn't really give us much of a time of day. We were super young still at the time. In the early 90s, we were like in our early 20s, and so all we wanted to do was make music and to be true about what our faith. I mean, we weren't super evangelistic, but we were, straightforward about what we believed.
He played, a song or two that talked about God.
Like the word got out on campus that for the, small amount of listeners that I had, that there were some bands that were Christian, and some people would call in and flip out,
So he got a letter from his boss saying he had to shut down any kind of Christian music. So he wrote a 3-page letter to the student affairs office saying he felt that was discrimination against.
And he went above her. Like, that isn't really punk rock to play punk rock bands and sing about God. I go, I think that's the most punk rock. It's almost like out-punking the punk rockers. You look at it either way.
Dude, that first record is incredible. Sin Disease.
There was nothing like that in Christian music ever. And I think kids were just shocked. They were just like, yes, finally, thank you.
Before that, I hadn't really heard anything that I felt like could hold a candle to anything like in the mainstream.
Well, those were bands that were just incredible bands. Not like, oh, Living Sacrifice, they're the Christian version of whatever. It was like Living Sacrifice is the whatever version of Living Sacrifice. Just an awesome band.
I just wanted Christians to be able to put out art again and be accepted and be judged on the music first.
But a lot of the Christian bands were sort of just, each band was like the Christian version of something. Like, oh, you like Earth Crisis? Listen to this band, they're the Christian Earth Crisis. Oh, you like the Ramones? These guys are the Christian Ramones. This is the Christian Green Day.
As far as I knew, that was all that Christian music was about. Michael W. Smith and Sandy Patty and Petra, and I knew that, that didn't connect with me on any levels.
So we had a lot of like worshipy records in the house. Growing up, obviously weren't so into that.
Pre-Tooth and Nail years, it felt like when you said Christian music, the first thing people thought of was like Michael W. Smith or Amy Grant. It was never like, this sense of like, wow, that's really good.
Well, I mean, honestly, I never listened to Christian music in my life. Like, I know a lot of people grew up with it, but I didn't grow up with it. I always thought it was pretty dumb, to tell you the truth. Just if it was Christian music, it was like this really annoying capo acoustic guitar stuff that people in the South would do at church or something.
And when you're a high school Christian kid, you don't want to listen to the bad secular music, and so you're just on the hunt for anything decent. The Crucified and Scattered Few and a few other bands that were, if you were into punk rock, that was about all there was.
We didn't have a ton of places to tour. We didn't have legitimate booking agents or anything. It was just all very DIY.
So my last semester of college, I'm living back with my parents, and I'm coming home playing video games with my brother, you know, growing out like a beard, just all depressed, like the worst case scenario ever, like what am I gonna do with my life? And my dad, who's very, very hardworking, my mom, you know, we had it out one night, like, you know, are you gonna get a job where you're making money, kind of a vibe. 4 days later, I go, hey, I got a job. It's in Southern California, I'm leaving in a week. And I remember my mom was like started kind of crying, like, oh no, like, what if we die? It was like an 80s movie, like, I'm moving out. So in January 1993, I moved down to Southern California from Oregon. I just graduated from Oregon State University. I was staying with a family until I could find my own place. And their daughter and her boyfriend, we're gonna go see this band called Focus, a hardcore band from Southern California. They were playing with a bunch of other hardcore bands at this church. And it was in a basement, and I'd never seen anything like it. Hundreds of kids packed in, an amazing scene. I was blown away. The kids were just sweaty and just packed, and kids were just freaking ripping their shirts off. Focus was selling little 4-song cassette tapes, and that was the only way that they were basically, people knew about them was by word of mouth, their shows, and like these little, you know, cassette tapes that they were selling. So I was stoked. I bought one, and that's the very first time I started thinking about, hey man, who's putting these bands out? So right after that, I went and started my new job at the record label that I was working at. Yeah, when he first came in, he was just hyper. I mean, he would do his job, but he would also just be bouncing around the whole office. We had this band called Mortification in Australia, so that FedEx delivers their artwork. Brandon's like his second week on the job, tears open the package, walks around the office showing everybody, this is terrible, we can't put this out. Are you kidding me? I could do this in my sleep. So I pulled him aside. We went to McDonald's, and he was a vegan at the time or something. And we're at McDonald's, and I said, dude, you're gonna get fired. You gotta chill out. About 3 or 4 weeks after living there, a band named Mortal that was on the label Frontline Records that I was working for was playing up in Hollywood at the world famous Roxy. And when I got there was a band opening called Wish for Eden. And Rob Walker was the lead singer. He was a little bit bigger guy, and he ripped off his shirt in the middle of the show.
If you know Rob, when he's high, he just takes his shirt off, and you know, he's a substantial character, and he just didn't care.
He said, God loves everyone if you're fat or if you're skinny, and then he just freaking just started dominating. It was sick. And I was like, if I did a label, I would sign this band.
Brandon and I were just looking at each other like, this is awesome.
So Focus and Wish for Eden are these 2 great bands. Bring them to my label that I'm working at. They're like, we're not into it. This music sucks. And I was like, well, I think the music's sick. So then I was faced with a dilemma. I'm working for another record label. And so what I wanted to do is do my own label. I went and pitched them the idea of running the label through them as like a farm league. And then it would be uplifted to them, and they were not into that idea either. So I go, okay, I'm just gonna go get a loan to the bank. Just totally naive. So I type up this like 4-page business plan on why Tooth and Nail will dominate.
I don't remember the banks.
I don't either.
I remember him saying, hey, I remember him mentioning.
Give me a loan.
So I walk in there, I'm wearing flip-flops and like OP shorts and a t-shirt. I need $150,000.
See, there's another thing. He went out and did it and didn't tell us.
And the guy's sitting in some Armani suit at the other side, literally trying to hold back his laughter. So I'm like, well, my parents don't have any money. The only other person I could think of was my grandpa.
He didn't know about the music industry. He didn't know the type of music.
Said he had never listened to a CD before, but he believed in me, and so he said instead of $150,000, he'd give me $60,000 at 10% interest. And I said, well, 10% just seems like highway robbery. He goes, well, no one else believes in you in the world but me. No one else believes in you in the entire world but me. I'm kind of getting choked up. You know, my mom called me and said, this is our inheritance. This is our family's money. You know, and I can understand their concern. I mean, my grandpa's older, and this is like their inheritance, and I'm basically taking it and putting out like hardcore punk rock bands from Southern California, and they're like, oh my gosh.
He probably would have had a harder time with the rhythm and all that stuff, but he didn't know that. His point was he trusted him.
I go to my mailbox a couple days later, and there's a check sitting in there, and $60,000. And so I went and got the loan, and then I wanted to sign Wish for Eden and Focus. I approached a friend of mine who I just got to know when I moved down to Southern Cal named Mike Knott.
Well, Mike Knott, I mean, legendary forever.
So I said, hey man, I need you to help me get a couple of these bands signed. Will you be the president of my record label? And he's like, well, what does that entail? I'm like, all you have to do is meet with the bands a couple times, take them out for dinner, and I'll give you $2,000.
Michael Knott started calling, and me and him started, talking, and he was giving me advice. And then we went out to dinner to work out the final details of the contract. And you see Brandon's arms under the table, passing money to Mike Knott to pay for the bill, but Mike Knott supposedly the guy from the label. It's like, even if Brandon wasn't part of the label, what's he doing at the dinner?
I just did not think that anybody would sign with me. I'm like this 23-year-old kid with a loan from his grandpa with no real experience. So I just didn't know if Mike Knott was somebody that had a name, a reputation. So that being said, in these meetings I was always his right-hand guy, even though really I was the guy. That deck right there was my apartment. That's where I started Tooth and Nail Records. Right there.
Oh, there were so many CDs in there. His furniture was the boxes of CDs made into a couch and a table. I think the CDs were even inside the refrigerator. There was no food.
Well, we were extremely underfunded. We would just take every dime that we had and we would put it into all the marketing and all the manufacturing and making these really inexpensive records that we thought, they actually came out pretty good for the money. We did Wish Reading for $5,000 and, it was awesome. We recorded it to tape. We actually recorded it at 15 IPS instead of 30 IPS. So half speed to have it have a bigger sound, but that also saved us on tape.
We wanted to make the best record that was in the Christian industry at that time. We wanted to make a record that could actually have a chance to cross over. My whole thing is I didn't want to work with any of the old timers, if you will, in Christian music. I didn't want to get an old sounding record. I wanted something that was current. I remember we're like, Brandon, we got to get a real mastering guy. We have to get a real mastering guy. And whatever labels were out at that time were using the same guy, and they just sounded flat and dead. He's like, oh, I'm freaking, I don't know if it's in the budget. And I go, it should be in the budget because it's going to dictate how the record sounds. And so Mark Rodriguez found big bass Brian Bernie Grumman, who's amazing at mastering, and that's where we went. And Brandon put the money up and did it, and I don't think he regrets it. It was a great sounding record.
Came home from Southern California off the plane, and he was holding the first CD, and it was Wish for Eden. It's here, Wish for Eden, Tooth and Nail Records, first release, can you believe it? And I'm like holding it, just super excited. He gave me a copy, and he's like, this is my CD. This is on the label that I just started. So they basically said, we're not into giving you your own label. And I was like, well, you don't have to give me any label. I will fund everything. And then if a band gets to a certain amount of records, I'll just hand it off to you guys and you take it to the next level. And they're like, no. So at that point, I knew that I was going to quit. And when I quit, they escorted me out of the building that exact day. I came back a week later to do a layout at their office. The president of the company escorted me downstairs again a second time. We came down here on the lawn and proceeded to have a few words with each other and kind of got into a little scuffle. And basically, that's how Tooth and Nail was born.
I really met Brandon in California. And he said, what do you think about the name Tooth and Nail? I totally remember that. And I was like, that's kind of weird, but that's cool.
Dude, I'm taking it as I make it the whole way. I've never done a record label. I've worked at a record label for 3 months as a phone rep and 3 months as a radio guy. I'm signing these bands. I'm just flying by the seat of my pants. I got $60,000. I'm super frugal with that money. Because I had no income coming in, no paycheck, I was very strict. Since I was trying to live off, I had to live off the loan as well. So I lived off $5 a day. So this is the BRC, which I think is the best dollar menu item of any fast food restaurant, in my opinion. I ate here every single day that I was in town, which was most of the time, for 5 solid months at this exact El Pollo Loco. Focus and Wish for Eden signed, thinking they were signing to Mike Knott's label and I was his employee. And then basically after about I'd say 2 or 3 weeks of that, Mike Knott meets me, I'll never forget this, at a bar. He's like, meet me at this bar at midnight, at this dive, punk rock, social distortion kind of bar in, I think it was in Huntington Beach. And I'll never forget, it's super smoky and he's sitting there playing pool, smoking a cigarette. He's like the coolest guy of all time. And he just basically looked up and said, look, I can't keep up with you. You call me all the time. I'm not gonna run a label. So I think we should just nix it. So then I called the bands and said, hey, the cat's out of the bag. Basically, Mike Knott doesn't own the label, I do. If you guys don't want to be on the label, that's fine. But at that point, I was already paying for the records and they're all into it. And I'm the only one they really worked with anyway, so.
I got together with a buddy of mine, and that's when I decided I was allegedly a songwriter, and then we did some demos. We called it Starflyer, and so that was that. I met Brandon at this music festival called Full Industrial Strength in '93.
At that show, Ronnie pulls me aside and said, my brother has a band called Starflyer. He has a demo, take the demo, listen to it, you'll love it. I go in the car with Jason, that's the first time I ever meet Jason Martin. And we listened to Starflyer 59. And it's just freaking the coolest thing ever, you know? I was so into it. And I knew right then that if I got Tooth and Nail off the ground, I would try to sign Starflyer as my third group.
I got a call from Brandon about 3 months later saying that he was starting a label if I wanted to put out a record, which I thought was just incredibly sweet news.
When Brandon asked us to help produce a band by Jason called Starflyer 59, it was a big honor for us because at the time we were in a band called Mortal, and we were trying to get our feet wet with trying to produce.
I think we used every mic that Gene Eugene had to mic it all separately. And we had pedals hooked up to it so we could like manipulate some of the sounds.
Starflyer Silver. Yep. And I was blown away by the packaging. And the disc was orange, and I'm like, oh, this is sick.
My brothers are the ones that really got me into music. They would get like the catalogs, and they would always get stuff, and I was like never allowed to get stuff for whatever reason. Then eventually when I was able to get my first thing with my own money, I bought Starflyer 59.
That was the best. That was. I should have quit right then. That was as sweet as it got. I mean, I thought that was the neatest thing on earth that I had this, you know, that we went to a studio, recorded this thing, and I just thought it was incredible. Somebody was, you know, dumb enough to spend money on putting out music that I worked on. I mean, honestly, you know.
I guesstimate that we did almost 40 albums in this little house. One album that really comes to mind is the Blaine's first album. We called it 21 because we recorded the record in just 21 hours. The whole idea was to just record the whole album in one day, got there early in the morning, recorded all through the night. 21 hours later, we had all 12 songs tracked. POD was on the album, as well as a lot of other people like Ronnie from Joy Electric. Back then, POD was not a big band yet at all. In fact, I put out their first recording on Helpless Amongst Friends, Volume 1, which was a hardcore comp that I put out. The studio was kind of a dump, but it sounded really good in there.
We had already recorded our first album at the Green Room with Gene Eugene, and it was Spill. Brandon liked the album and was like, let's just put that album out. So we put the album out. Brandon had the artwork redone. It was a really weird, crazy-looking cover. And I think I was the only person in the band who liked the cover.
So I got their CD, and after I started Tooth and Nail, I basically just licensed that CD and put it out for them.
When we went in to do our second album, The Spark, you could really see the difference. We shot our first video, and it was super low budget. We went into this like a warehouse that had been used for a cable access video show.
The cool thing about my grandpa is that he didn't make me pay a payment. He just said, pay me when you can pay me. So I'm just letting the debt roll up, you know? And so then we decided, hey, let's go to Cornerstone and have our own booth, which to me is a dream come true, because the 3 prior years, I had been going to Cornerstone as a fan.
I remember, you know, going to Cornerstone and seeing all these different bands and all over the place and different stages that they had going on. And when Brandon first met me, he was walking through the campsite. We had a campfire going, and he was in college or just out of college, and had his backpack, and he's like, hey guys, can I set my camp up with you guys?
And, you know, I have no idea what to expect. I mean, again, this is like pre-real internet marketing or anything like that, so I've been doing print advertising for the bands and physical magazines. And I've done, you know, ads here and there and done, you know, some street marketing, but I have no idea if anyone even is going to know who we are.
But Cornerstone, yeah, we went out in a van. We blew the engine in Arizona. We had to call Brandon. We have an engine out. We need a new engine. 1994 Cornerstone Festival. It was us, Wish for Eden, Starflyer 59, sometime Sunday.
In the beginning, when we first went to Cornerstone that first year, it was like mind-blowing. Brandon thought that maybe we'd sell $300-400 worth of CDs and T-shirts and whatever. Ended up, I think by the end of the week, it was like over $10,000 in merchandise, and the table was consistently flooded, and it was just like Tooth and Nail had become this thing.
As Tooth and Nail kind of started getting on the scene, I made sure I was there. And I guess it was my senior year is when Tooth and Nail released the first album, which was Wish for Eden. And I remember picking it up and being stoked.
We sold everything that we brought, and we sold every cassette and CD we had, every T-shirt, every sticker, everything we had. Gone. Talk about merchandise flying off the shelves. I mean,
We almost got tired selling shirts. You know, pumping them out there like a fast food assembly line. It was nuts.
And I remember coming home from that trip and like laying on my floor in my apartment because, you know, I worked at the booth like 15 hours a day, and I would also go to the shows and, you know, have my brother take over and then come back. And I remember being totally mentally exhausted, but also kind of freaking out like, I am on to something.
And it was one band after another, and the crowd of kids was pretty big. And then by the end of like all the events, it was like crazy. Like the little tent had people all out and around, just trying to hear the bands that were playing.
So when I got to Cornerstone, it was super encouraging because you get there, and my goal for Tooth and Nail was a base of fans that would buy all the records because they knew it was quality, because they knew it was legitimate, and because they knew it was special, and they were part of something. I didn't really know if that would work though.
Tooth and Nail catalog was like the coveted thing. When that came, it was like, okay, awesome. This is what's coming out. This is what these dudes are doing now.
My mom would ask me what I wanted, and all I would do is just go through the Tooth and Nail catalog and pick out like the beanie and the shorts and like, whatever records I wanted to listen to. Tooth and Nail Dickies shorts with the Tooth and Nail logo, which was always on my Christmas list, but never got.
Those are awesome discovery times of music, and that's like really what set everything in motion for us.
I was shocked that people said they were buying every release, you know, and people would come up and they're like, I bought Wish for Eden, I bought Focused, I bought Starflyer, which to me is crazy that someone would buy all three. With Wish for Eden, you know, we shipped 3,000 copies. Right after Thanksgiving the next week, we had another 1,000 copies were ordered. And it just kept selling. Every single week we get another order for 200 or 300 or 400 copies. And it's like, hey man, we're onto something, you know? And when it was all said and done, in the first 7 or 8 months, we had sold 10,000 Wish for Eden records.
Yeah, it was weird. Some people didn't know how to take it, and others were just embracing it, you know? It was kind of a split down the middle, I think, you know? Parents hated us, and the kids loved us, you know? How good rock should be.
I realized at this point that like working out of my apartment just wasn't legit. So we get an office that's 100 square feet. I mean, that is super, super, super small, and there's no windows. You know, at that point, you know, I was definitely gonna start pressing on, so I still haven't really started paying back my grandpa, so I'm also accumulating 10% interest. I'm getting more nervous, and of course my parents are getting nervous as well, understandably. Aaron Sprinkle had sent me a demo of this band called MXPX.
So, how did you meet Brandon Abel?
I've never met him.
Well, how?
We went in the studio, and we were going to do this. Brandon Ebel, or whatever his last name was going to pay for the 7-inch, and he was going to put it on Tooth and Nail.
Told me that.
And he hadn't really heard it yet. And then he heard it, and then he wanted to. Then he went crazy.
You wanted to sign his label.
He wanted to sign his label, like, whatever.
Portaloo played a show over on somewhere over kind of Port Orchard area or something. And Andy from MXPX was there, and he gave us a cassette tape. It was called Orange Station Wagon. And it had a drawing of an orange station wagon on it. And it was really kind of hard to listen to. But I could tell there was something there. Andy Houston, our first guitar player, was always wearing this plaid shirt. I mean, his mom definitely bought him this shirt. And it was just very big plaid, like the lines were like this, and they were kind of squiggly, so as if you were like looking at a magnifying glass and seeing really up close what the fibers kind of looked like in the shirt. So a friend of ours said that was his magnified plaid shirt because he wore it all the time. And then we played another show like a few months later in Bremerton. One of the bands canceled, and the MXPX guys were there. And they're like, can we play? Our gear's just down the road. We live in Bremerton. So I saw him play that night, and I flipped out. Yuri got tired of writing out magnified plaid, like on our demo tapes, on our posters. Because of that, Yuri decided, okay, we gotta abbreviate this. MXPX, he made the X's real small. Everybody immediately latched onto that and just started calling us MXPX.
With MXPX, Aaron said he was just going to do it on his own. And, he kind of convinced, Aaron's very convincing, and he kind of convinced me that he could do this thing.
Aaron Sprinkle not only invited us to come play these shows in Seattle, he also recorded us for free. And then I said, hey, I've got this studio in my church that I'm recording bands at. I was just starting to record other bands. And I'll record you guys for free, but I want to give it to my friend Brandon, who just started this label Tooth and Nail. I want to give it to him first. We were like, 7 minutes, that'd be amazing. 4 songs. So we went to Seattle and recorded with Aaron at this studio that he worked at. I don't think he worked full time, and in retrospect, he's told me that he had no idea how to record anything.
It's not like I get really deep in my lyrics or anything, but I don't just talk about what I did today or something. I sat on the floor. Yeah, I think the lyrics are pretty good for the most part. You can understand them as long as you, not live, but they'll have words in them. And, yeah, what they're about. I don't know. They're all about God and us and being rad.
I was 19. I think I just turned 20 when we started recording. And I had only worked out of this studio in my church that was actually really cool looking back on it, but was limited compared to Avast. And I just sort of like said, yeah, I can do it. But I'd never used about half the stuff in there before.
So the word was, come and record these 4 songs, and I'm going to get this guy to put it out on Tooth and Nail Records. This guy, Brandon.
So we signed him to a 2-album record contract, and we recorded Coconacha.
The record that really like got me super into all this stuff and to find out more about Tooth and Nail and what they were doing was MXPX Coconacha. That was the record I was like, this sounds so much like what I'm into, like Operation Ivy and Rancid and all these bands. And I listened to that thing nonstop. I'd play it for all my friends at school. I'm like, it's a Christian band. Like, I can't believe that, it sounds this cool.
Yeah, I think, if memory serves, I think that MXPX did their first Seattle show in this house in the living room. We called it the House of Funk because, for one, it's a really nasty, kind of dilapidated house and smells funky, but also because my old band Don't Know were sort of a funky band, so hence the House of Funk. There were people in the Christian scene that there was something that they didn't like. Like, I remember hearing from a guy, the photo from the Don't Know EP where we have chocolate coming down our faces, and he wrote a letter in saying he was bummed because it reminded him of the days he used to be into horror movies. Back then, if you were in an indie rock band or a punk band that was associated with Tooth and Nail, it was seen as like a Christian label or whatever, so it just had a stigma attached to it to where I think people thought that we weren't a legit band.
We were absolutely caught between two worlds, where standard metal industry, kind of didn't give us the time of day, and then Christians just were like, well, that's too extreme. I've got maybe one kid in my youth group that likes this stuff.
When we played shows with Converge or Neurosis or Botch, we definitely would get heckled.
We tried setting up a show with Modest Mouse, and the day of the show, they found out that we were on Tooth and Nail, and they basically bailed on the bill.
I mean, we were in this subgenre of a subgenre.
Like, if you were a Christian and into hardcore music, like, you were in, like, a different scene, too. Like, you were part of, like, the overall scene, but then you were in this other niche, and you were really proud of it, because it was like, wait, we're way more punk rock than everyone else, because we're singing about Jesus. I mean, like, this is, like, totally different.
The people that consider themselves really sort of like, I'm going to carry the badge for, what punk is really about. You can't believe in God and be a punker because punkers don't believe in God, that whole thing.
Even though I don't think it was very controversial at all, for some reason when we first started, the fact that a lot of non-Christians accepted it or liked it made the people that were anti-Christian maybe hate it. And then also some very conservative right-wing people also hated it as well. We had pastors on radio stations come out and talk against, speak out against Tooth and Nail, all kinds of stuff. So in some ways, I think maybe that controversy of both the right-wingers and then people that are like very anti-Christian, maybe that kind of like we had two groups of people that kind of hated us. I don't know, maybe that kind of helped put us on the map. I have no idea.
I don't have a week that goes by where I don't run into somebody at a party in Seattle or talking to a publicist in New York or talking to a musician from LA. I don't have a week that goes by where I don't talk to somebody who wasn't influenced by Roadside Monument, Frodus. 90 Pound Wuss had a huge influence on the local scene. If you check with the KXP DJs, you'll find out that 3 or 4 of them were raised on Tooth and Nail bands.
John Pettibone, any straight edgers out there would probably know who that guy is, but 9 Iron Spitfire were playing, and I remember him saying to the crowd, let the band play, like, don't be so stuck up that they have different beliefs than us or whatever. And so even though he totally disagreed with what we were about or what he thought we were about, he at least had enough respect to say something from the stage.
The irony is that I became a Christian after Frodus broke up. At the time I was a pretty staunch agnostic, so I was not too excited about being on what was perceived to be a Christian label, but everybody seemed cool. And nobody was checking our lyrics, like against, Leviticus or something.
But in the early days, there was such a stigma with like the Christian rock thing and the Tooth and Nail thing, we would just throw our own shows. That's why we would just do it in the living room of our own house,
There were so many people packed into the living room of that house. If you went underneath the basement and looked at the joist, it was bending, flexing, just ready to snap. And I wasn't even sure I really wanted to play. I was like, last thing I need to do is die at the House of Funk. What a way to go.
So it's spring of our senior year of high school, so it's 1995. We put out Pokin' At Ya. We've been playing a lot of local shows, mostly Seattle area, around Seattle, and the shows were going really well.
But I remember talking to Mike's mom on the phone, and she was like, they only can record over spring break. That is it. I mean, they'd been playing so many shows, they had skipped school. We put out Teenage Politics, and that one went real crazy.
I remember we went to lunch one day. Mike said he would stay back at the studio, and he wrote a song in that hour and came back, and within 2 hours we had that song tracked and ready to mix.
The first record that I thought was cool all the way through and was just like that. That's a game changer for me at that age and that time in music was the Teenage Politics record by MXPX. That was just like, I love every song on that record. Even hearing those songs, like right now, if you played one of those songs, it would just take me back to that moment.
We recorded Teenage Politics our senior year of high school, spring break. I remember one of my teachers, when we were doing our 5-year plan in class, I said, I'm going to go on tour, I'm going to be in this band, I'm going to put out albums. She told everybody else, this is an example of what not to do. The next day, we went over to Seattle and filmed the video for Wanted. So our Pokin' At Ya video came out way later than the album. The day after that, we leave for our first tour. Finally, we're going on tour. We're graduated. We've got our buddy Rob is our roadie, and he's the only adult on tour with us.
When we toured with MXPX, we used to bomb each other's vehicles in the freeway with all sorts of items being tossed out of the vans. First, I think it started with, soda. Then it turned to, urine and soda bottles.
We went on our first national tour. It was a 7-week national tour, and we took MXPX with us, although it was clearly evident by midway in that tour that they were already getting way more popular than we were.
We went all over the country, following around Blunderhead. We got the show in Orange County, where Tooth and Nail's from, and we show up, and there's just all this network of people, all these band guys saying, hey man, immediately latching onto us, and then, boom, showtime, all the kids start flowing in. I'm like, somebody here is really big. Some band that we're playing with that night.
They fly down, and I remember we came to the church, and girls were going bonkers for MXPX. And dudes, everyone was going crazy for this band.
Everybody knew all the words to Pokin' At Ya. There's all these people that knew who we were.
And everyone knows all the lyrics to all the songs on Pokin' At Ya. And the reality is setting in that I'm sitting on the side of the stage thinking, every single one of these kids has bought this album. It's 2,000 miles away. I don't know. It was just a weird kind of reality of setting in that this is big. It's bigger than the other bands. They became the #1 priority for the company. It was all the other bands were kind of jealous of them. Our main focus of the label was trying to break this band.
Once we started touring, we just kept touring and touring and touring. We never stopped. And I think that's why, finally, part of why Life in General was such a drastic improvement.
That was the best produced sounding record. I felt it was the strongest record that we had at that time. And that record really was the record that sort of broke Tooth and Nail out in the mainstream for sure.
My parents worked in a church, and we lived on the church property. They had 20 acres around the church, and we lived on the property. And my parents had a key, so I would sneak the key and break into the church and blast an XPX. We would play those 2 records and act them out on stage in the church, 11 or 12, me with my bass.
That record was a super, super groundbreaking record for Tooth and Nail. Very special. It had the song Chick Magnet on it, which was a huge smash.
Darren Dunn flew up and did 3 videos. We did Chick Magnet, we did Move to Bremerton, we did Doing Time, all in one weekend.
That album was probably the biggest, at the time, was the biggest anticipated album we put out. It was 1996. And when we put that out, the whole thing just went gangbusters.
And they would play us on MTV straight a little bit, on the specialty shows.
Please welcome from Bremerton, Washington, MXPX.
That was one of the coolest things, getting to go to New York City and go and do interviews.
I really didn't get any connections or know anyone for probably a year and a half later. We just played parties and the halls around town and stuff like that.
You did it because you loved it, right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
We got added to the End up here in Seattle, which was huge. started playing Chick Magnet. I decided to go down to K-Rock. I had this big like booklet I had made of all their touring they had done and all these things, and she was just kind of looking at me and she kind of smirked and laughed, and she was like, you know, Brandon, you can't just walk in here and get on K-Rock, right? And I was like, no, I didn't know that. I thought you just walked in and asked. And she was like, that's not how it works. 2 weeks later, she calls me up and goes, okay, we're gonna add it. It's like, yeah. After that, everything started going crazy, berserk. MXPX on a tour with No Doubt, Real Big Fish, Face to Face. And it was awesome. It was kind of like, mission accomplished. We had got them to a certain level. We had worked our tails off. Some things were not meant to be explained. Welcome to Tooth and Nail. Don't get me wrong, I like Southern California, but it just didn't really click with me. So once I signed MXPX and Blenderhead and Sometime Sunday, Don't Know, started working with the Seattle bands, I just wanted to get out of Southern California. I wanted to be closer to home. So I fly up and we look for different places and we find an office in Pioneer Square. It's second in Yesler. It's by far and away the cheapest office space we could find downtown.
The two guys that were working for him at the time didn't want to move to Seattle, so I ended up just becoming the operations manager. It was crazy.
I immediately call up Bill Power and say, hey, I need you to fly down tomorrow and work with me for 2 weeks in Southern California just to get the ball rolling.
I remember we slept on the floor in Brandon's apartment, and then we drove up everything, the office up to there. And I think for that first year, literally worked every day from like 8 or 9 in the morning until 10 or 11 at night.
Tooth and Nail was around for 2 years in Orange County before moving to Seattle, but yet there was still a huge selection of bands that were from Orange County.
All right, Supertones, let's rock.
Jason Carson, play drums to the Supertones.
How long have you been with the band?
We went to the band, Matt and I started the band about 7.5 years ago.
Our band really sucked, and somehow we got on the bill for some of these shows. Like, we got to play one night with Plank Eye, or we got to play one night with Focus. We were in that scene, and we saw all of our friends in all these bands, Javelina, all these bands that were playing shows, that they started getting signed. And we were the only ones that weren't getting signed.
But it took a little bit of convincing to sign the Supertones.
Do you want the whole Supertone story?
I knew Brandon Evil. I kept on kind of trying to meet with him. I went to his offices when they were down here in Irvine, and I tried to give him these demo tapes, and I struck out, I think I struck out 2 or 3 times. We had every style of music you can possibly imagine. We had funk, punk, rock, hardcore, metal, speed metal.
And they were terrible. And he tried to get signed to Tooth and Nail for 2 years.
Disco. We had a polka song somewhere in there. We had ballads.
I was like, you guys need to have an overhaul in your band. Because me and Mike Herrera from MXPX had been bugging them about, hey, you should change your name. We should kind of help you guys focus your music a little bit so it's not a bunch of different styles, but one style, and kind of stick with that whole thing.
And they came to me and they said, we're going to change to ska, and they had all these new members, and they actually were pretty good.
The Supertones were called Saved at that point.
And I couldn't accept that they were good because they were saved.
And I said, why don't you guys just be a ska band?
So then we did it. We wrote a 3rd and a 4th song, and we had 4 ska songs, and we'd play these shows, and all of a sudden it was like, this is great, this is working, this is good.
And so they changed the name to Supertones, they became good. I just couldn't accept that they were good. You know what I mean? When someone's not good and they become good, you still kind of remember that they weren't good.
At that point, I was running a series of shows called April Fest at my church. Being the promoter, I went out and got as good of bands as I could possibly get. There was this new Tooth and Nail band out called MXPX.
They had a show every year called April Fest, and MXPX played it, and that was kind of my first introduction to Tooth and Nail. I think the sticker said, Tooth and Nail Records, Moms Like Us Too.
I thought to myself, well, MXPX is going to need an opening band, and why not make it my band? And the church was crazy that night. There was over 1,000 people in the room, and I think we killed it. We did a great show.
I'm still on the fence. Even though they were great, being a ska band, I was never into the old band, the old style, so I was still on the fence. I didn't know.
The MXPX guys stayed in the guest room, and then Brandon needed a place to stay, so he stayed in my room. I let Brandon sleep in my bed. I slept on the floor.
So anyway, I stayed at his house one night, and he pretty much locked me in his room.
Yeah, okay, now's my time. I gotta talk to him. I gotta pitch the band. So Brandon, what did you think? And he says, oh, you guys did pretty good. And the lights were out. He was like, you could tell he was trying to go to sleep. And I'm like, I can't miss this opportunity. And just before I was ready to ask him, hey, is there any chance you can sign us now? Brandon just says with full authority, good night. He just turns over and that was it. I was like, oh man. The next morning, like I said, we got up, we had waffles in my mom's kitchen with the MXPX guys. Everybody's packed, the suitcases are zipped up, they're ready to leave for the airport. I see Brandon go down the hall to my bedroom to get his bag, and I'm like, if it doesn't happen now, it's never gonna happen. Everything is perfect up to this point. I am going to go tell him he has to sign us. I walk into my bedroom behind him, and I close the door behind me.
He turns around, shuts the door, and he's like,
okay, Brandon, look. I want you to sign us. You need to sign us. You've got to sign us. Like, man, everybody else in this whole scene is signed.
we want to be on Tooth and Nail, what's it going to take? And I said, look, let me out of the room. And he said no, and he blocked the door. And so he forced me to talk to him for over an hour, and I still didn't sign him after that. Then finally I did, and obviously it was a good decision. Okay, fine, I'll sign you guys, but you have to change the name of your band.
So I'm like, that's fine. We'll do it, whatever it takes.
So later that day, he said, I talked to Scott Soletta from Plank Eye. He came up with the name Supertones.
Well, there actually is another band up in New York, I believe, called the Supertones. I believe they're like a kind of a surf rock band.
So I go, I think there already is another Supertones. He goes, we're going to be called the Orange County Supertones.
So we are the Orange County Supertones. Very nice.
And I was like, okay, fine, we'll just do it.
Can I call you sweet?
We started touring with these bands, like Face to Face was one of the big bands, Dancehall Crashers, No Doubt. We toured with Real Big Fish and all these types of bands. They were on their show Oddville on MTV and just all this different stuff. They were just blowing up all over the place. Pretty much a staple in the Warped Tour in the US, in Europe, in Australia. And then one day we get in like a Hits magazine, I think, and there was this, we were just reading through there and it said, MXPX is being courted by a major, this label and that label and whatever. We're just like, what?
All of a sudden, MXPX, who owes me 2 more records, they're saying, hey, we want to go to a major label.
We started getting a lot of attention from all these major labels after Life in General was big. And we're still kids. I mean, we were still kids at the time, maybe 18.
But 3 albums, 2 EPs, and 1 new guitarist later, the members of MXPX began to question the record deal they had signed while still juniors in high school.
We realized from talking to other people in bands that some things weren't quite right.
I'd spent all my money I was making on the bands, but mostly on MXPX. And, I hadn't saved any money. At one point, we sold 500,000 or 600,000 records, and I didn't have a dime of savings, and I hadn't paid off any of the loan. Because all the money I got, I just would put back into the company.
Tooth and Nail was not really wanted us to look at other labels, but we pretty much did what we wanted at that point. Went up to like 3 different labels, finally decided on A&M Records.
In July, MXPX signed with a major label, A&M Records, which decided to launch their relationship by simply re-releasing the band's latest Tooth and Nail album, Life in General.
There was definitely a lot of tension, a lot of disagreements with us and Tooth and Nail. And honestly, the catalyst wasn't even the band and label. It was more like the manager and label and the lawyer and a lot of miscommunication on both sides, I think. And then I remember at Tom Festival, I did this like MTV News was at Tom Fest, which was so weird because there's just this tiny little, literally like by this lake in the mountains in like Oregon. It was like MTV News was there and like it was all controversy and all this stuff. And they interviewed me for like an hour in front of this stage about like, MXPX and they're trying to go to a major label and all this stuff and whatever. And I just said, they're my friends, which they were. I mean, we toured together. We played, we must have played like 60 or 70 shows together.
Despite the cooperative nature of this move to the big time, MXPX's departure from Tooth and Nail has soured some longtime friendships.
And so I just said all this stuff, like we're really happy for them, all this stuff. And at the end, the guy's like, well, you were really close friends and now they're trying to leave and, didn't it get awkward? And so at the end, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, I'd be lying if I didn't say it was awkward. I'd be lying if I said that things weren't tense and didn't get weird, somewhere along the line. And I mean, there's a certain point at which we were told we couldn't even talk to the band anymore. And that obviously strained communications between us. And that literally, that one sentence was like what they showed on MTV. I was like, oh my God, I was like mortified.
At that juncture right there with MXPX, if we would have just let them leave, we would have been done. The label would have been over right then in 1996. I needed to have a cut if they were going to break the contract, since they owed me 2 more records. Their lawyer and manager didn't want to do that. And then the major label wanted them so bad, they wrote me a check, and they wrote the band a check. And at that point, I had to make a decision. Do I downsize my staff, do this by myself again in my bedroom, or just fold it up, or do I take a gamble and put this money that I got from MXPX into another artist? And that's what I did, and I chose Supertones.
You gotta put yourself in our shoes. We're this band that's playing shows for 5 years in front of 40 or 50 kids and no one cares. I remember there was one kid that was a fan. He had a Save t-shirt. His name was Joey Hani. And the kid went to all the shows that we went to. When Supertone Strike Back came around to recording that album, it was a bigger budget. It was like more at stake.
I thought maybe this was the end of the road, you know? And I didn't really have a plan B.
And so we were like, okay, we got to do this. We got to make it as good as we can. There's a little more pressure. I remember recording that album thinking like, this is going to be great, but we never knew.
I didn't even make posters for the first release. And Jason Cartson called me and goes, bro, how come you have not made posters? They do the album. It's awesome.
All of a sudden, we started getting these headlining slots at the festival. There's only 3 or 4 headlining nights. We're playing shows in front of 1,500 people, like, out of nowhere. And it was our headlining show. We're like, what's happening here? And that's all I can describe it as, is this buzz that, like, took us by storm.
I will admit, sadly, that I did not think necessarily that the Supertones were going to be big right off the bat. And I was reluctant to sign them, and I did not get 110% behind them right away. Supertones go on and sell over 1 million records, and that's where that really put us on the map.
There was this unbelievable surge.
I was able to pay off all my debts, get out of debt, pay back my grandpa, which was a great feeling. Called up my mom, said, paid off grandpa, we're all good to go.
Oh, Grandpa thought it was wonderful.
Yeah,
Hey, this is a nice way to make money,
there's
Grandpa.
just 10% off this money. This is great. I mean,
At this point, we're expanding the staff to probably 18 to 20 people. Our mail order is getting so large that we have to keep renting office spaces all around us. And at one point, we actually rent downstairs at the bottom of the building. And since we have this big office building down at the bottom, we decided to put in a retail store.
Hey, you! Come here, come into the Tooth and Nail store. That's right, it's the Tooth and Nail store, finally open in Seattle, Washington. Come visit us, get the latest in men and women's clothing. We're located at 108.
yeah, we took him up when he was, 90?
He was about 90, 91.
Okay.
She was in her 80s.
So we take him up to Seattle, and at that point, Brandon is still downtown Seattle, and he's got his office, and he's got all the memorabilia now with the hats and the T-shirts and all the Tooth and Nail stuff and the CDs and so forth and so on.
Bumper stickers.
Yeah, so we take him up there, and Grandma and Grandpa are sitting there. We put a Tooth and Nail T-shirt on each one of them, and a hat, a baseball hat.
If we would have folded in 1996, then we would not have gone on, and, I wouldn't have been able to sign Under Oath, Amberlynn, Emery, 1,000 Foot Crutch, Jeremy Camp, Cutlass, KJ52, August Runs Red, Haste the Day, Norma Jean, Falling Up, Hawk Nelson.
There was this dream of Christian rock where someday Christian rock bands would have their records sold in regular stores, and that Christian rock bands would someday just play in regular venues and not only play in church youth group, gymnasiums and things like that.
It was all coming together before our eyes, and that's what made it fun, was that we were sort of part of something that was just building and building and building until it just blew up and got big.
I think we set the record for the amount of shows we played in 1 year for solid state Tooth and Nail bands. 1 year we played, I think it was 311 shows.
But I looked at Dad and Mom, and I said, because of you two, look at all this.
This is possible.
You think about how powerful that is.
But deep down through all those layers of the roughness and growing up on a Saskatchewan wheat farm, being one of many children that grew up with nothing and working 2 jobs during the Great Depression, basically being very hard on me my whole life, is in the end through all those layers, he did believe it.
After I picked up Focus, everything changed. Not only did I kind of become a devoted Tooth and Nail fan and seek out everything that they put out, but as far as me playing music and being interested in that kind of music, that my whole world just kind of changed.
Look at him. He's on a game show or something.
Thanks, John. Brent Weinstein, 17 years old.
I had a camp counselor who also had a mohawk, and it's kind of this metal dude, and so he and I connected, and we're hanging out. And he told me about this band, Living Sacrifice, and actually gave me a tape copy of the record Reborn. And listening to that at the time, I just thought, I'm not a Christian alone in this universe.
You just just knew that something was going on. You have 8 interns running a company with you. You don't even know why you're there, how you got there. You don't even know why my grandpa gave us the loan. You don't know why everyone's so into it. And you just do a show. You would say, hey, let's do a show next Saturday with the bands that no one's ever heard of. Hey, there's 1,000 people here. This is cool. This is, I guess, just how it works, you know? It wasn't because of me. It wasn't because of one specific band. But it was just something special.
We didn't care what the record was. We didn't care what style it was. As long as it had the Tooth and Nail logo on it, we just would buy it.
When I started Tooth and Nail Records, the hope was I could pay back my grandfather, put out these bands, support them, get their music heard. And, you know, if I went out of business in a couple of years, then I would have went and got another job. I never dreamed that it would get to a point where I could put out this many records and God could use me to make this much of an impact. And it's been a blast. I've loved doing it. It's been my passion, and I've been able to make a living doing something that I love, you know, since I graduated from college. I could not be more grateful or more excited for what's happened.